In 1999, the clinical trials for gene therapy had begun. There was a guy named Gelsinger. He was a young kid. I think he was 18 or 19 years old, and he passed away from the gene therapy. And it turns out that there was actually doctor malpractice that was primarily responsible for his death. After that happened, the FDA and the regulators stepped in, and they basically put a halt to all gene therapy clinical trials for about 7 years. The number of lives that were lost during that 7 years that went on that we did not make progress on getting gene therapy programs to market is significantly higher than the number of people that would have lost lives, which, by the way, it turns out when you go back to this particular death was driven by doctor malpractice, not by the gene therapy technology necessarily itself. And a lot of the stuff was understood. And I think we've heard Peter Thiel and others speak a lot about how the US has lost our appetite for risk. We say that if anyone dies or if any bad thing happens, a new technology should not progress. But when we look at the benefit of new technology relative to the cost of it, many of these technologies should progress at an accelerated pace, not at a decelerated pace. And the stepping in to stop these things from moving forward because, number one, we're rootly afraid of new technology. Number two, there's a lot of regulatory capture and incumbency that wants to see these things not succeed. I think we're really denying ourselves, in many cases, the opportunity to realize progress because we're so concerned about any loss. Nuclear fission is a really great example of this. 3 Mile Island accident and Fukushima, if you look at the total number of lives lost, Chernobyl is another good example. If you look at the total number of incremental cancers and the total number of lives that were lost from Chernobyl, you look at 3 Mile Island, you look at Fukushima, you can make a statistical argument that even with those extraordinary cataclysmic disasters, the number of lives that could have been improved, the number of lives that could have been saved, the progress that people could have made, the number of people that could have been pulled out of poverty if we made cheap, abundant energy available at an accelerated pace rather than at a decelerated pace, it could have had a much more significant effect. So I view this in the lens, this autonomous driving backlash, in the lens of what we see with a lot of new technologies, which is we lose our appetite for risk, we lose our tolerance for any sort of incremental loss, and we lose perspective on the fact that that loss is far, far, far outweighed relative to the gains that you gain if you can get that technology into market faster, not slower. And I think that's just such a real kind of storyline that's not told very often about how technology and progress is limited, particularly in the modern age, because once you have enough stuff, you're not willing to take as much risk. Meanwhile, you see China building 450 nuclear fission stations and the US building none. And I think that that's part of the story of where the US is today.